Welcome. Today's nutrition program is Boost Your Immune System with the Anti-Inflammatory Diet. My name is Julie Mahler. I am a registered dietitian nutritionist, and I work for IRG, Physical and Hand Therapy. Today's program, I'm going to cover what is an anti-inflammatory diet and what are some of the benefits. What are some of those anti-inflammatory foods that you want to eat more of because they can decrease inflammation? And then what are some of those foods that are more pro-inflammatory? In fact, they can increase inflammation, so you want to eat a little bit less of those types of foods. I will finish up with some questions, and amongst all the program, I will insert some ideas on how can you optimize your immune function, or how best can you help your immune system function at its top level. Anti-inflammatory diet is not it doesn't have strict rules. It's not rigid. Rather, it's a pattern of eating. It's a focus on eating more whole foods. And when I say that, it's like fruits, vegetables, whole grains, plant-based proteins, like beans and nuts, fish, fresh herbs, and spices. And then it's eating less of those highly processed foods. And I want to spend a moment defining what is a processed food. And I'm going to use the example of broccoli. So broccoli by itself, fresh broccoli, is not processed. If I chop up my broccoli and I put it in a bag and I freeze it and I put broccoli on the ingredient list with nothing else, that is minimally processed. If I add butter or a cheese sauce, then, and that could be in the deli section or it can be in the freezer section, that is a processed food. If I chop up my broccoli and I put it into a pot pie, well, then that is an ultra processed food. All four of those broccolis, all four foods are broccoli, right? But they're quite different in how they impact your body. And so the not processed and minimally processed, that can have quite positive benefit to it depending on the food, whereas that processed and ultra processed can have more of a negative effect. And it's something to think about. What are the health benefits of following an anti-inflammatory diet? Well, it can help with the following conditions, and that's rheumatoid arthritis, heart disease, cancer, diabetes, and autoimmune disorders. It can also help boost your immune function. What's really cool is the very foods that help decrease inflammation can improve immune function. There are additional benefits which anti-inflammatory diet can help patients recover more quickly from an overuse injury, from surgery. If you can decrease your inflammation before and after surgery, the process can go more smoothly, it can go more quickly, you can recover more quickly. And I'm not suggesting that food is the only thing that you would do, right? You would follow what your doctor recommended, you would do your physical therapy exercises, and in addition, you can combat the inflammation through food choices. Post-workout muscle soreness is another thing that can be helped through decreasing your inflammation. And if you were to work out, and when I say work out, if you have just had a hip replacement, that would mean perhaps trying to walk around the block, or trying to walk 100 feet, right? Or trying to walk 50 feet. Or if you're a marathoner, it's trying to train for that marathon. But no matter what it is that you're trying to accomplish, if you end up with sore muscles, then if you can decrease that inflammation at night, then the next day you can get right back at it. You're not so sore that you can't even move right out of bed. And so it can be quite powerful. So what to eat and drink? What are we going to do? What are we going to eat and drink to decrease that inflammation? So first, drink at least 8 cups of water a day or other clear fluids each day. And when I say clear fluids, what I mean is, one example I have listed there is hibiscus tea. That is an antioxidant that is quite effective. You could also drink coffee or teas, both herbal, both caffeinated and decaffeinated. Coffee and black tea are quite interesting. They have bioactive compounds in them. They're different, right? Because they're different products, but they have been shown to help with inflammation. It doesn't matter if they're caffeinated or decaffeinated. And so both products are nice. I would though caution you that try to limit your caffeine to 400 milligrams a day or less, ideally, because it can be too much of a good thing. The reason fluids are so important is because the human body is composed of more than 60% fluid, and every chemical process reacts in a fluid environment. And if you're a little bit dehydrated, that environment can get a little bit sludge-like. Yeah, that's not good, right? And so those processes don't work quite as well. How can you tell if you're dehydrated? Well, funny you should ask. You can look at the color of your pee and the smell of your pee. And if it's yellow and if it stinks most of the time during the day, well then, drink some more water. And if it is pale and it doesn't stink, then I think you're doing pretty good. There's several recommendations out there on how much water or fluid you need to drink during the day. There is the 8 cups a day. There is take your body weight. You could cut it in half, which let's say you're 200 pounds, you cut that in half, that's 100, so 100 ounces a day. But honestly, experimenting with how does your body feel? I realize it's hard. You don't want to be running to the bathroom all day long. And so what's the right balance for you? The next food is fruit. The recommendation is eat at least 2 servings of whole fruit each day. And with fruit, there is a wide variety of colors. And the cool thing is every color is a different phytonutrient. It's a different antioxidant. There's vitamins and minerals and fiber, and it's quite a powerful antioxidant. Let's talk about serving sizes just for a minute. Because servings, people get a little bit worried about, gosh, am I eating too much fruit? And this might give you a good idea of what is a serving of fruit. And so to take an example, if you look at the handout, it's 15 grams of carbohydrate equals, let's look at watermelon, 1.25 cups of watermelon, or 4 inches of banana. And the reason that's different is all about the amount of fluid in the product, right? The percentage of water. Watermelon has a whole lot of water in it. That's why it tastes quite sweet. However, you get a pretty decent serving size, 1.25 cups, for your 15 grams of carbohydrate, whereas a banana, and a banana is not bad or good, right? It just is. That's what it is. It doesn't have very much water in it. And so you get a smaller serving. Pick the fruits that you love and realize that they are quite beneficial and helpful. And then how to boost your immune function. There is a particular nutrient that has been well studied that's in fruit, and that is vitamin C. And vitamin C helps fight infection. It does, and it's water soluble, so you need a good source every day. And some good sources include citrus fruits like grapefruit, tangerines, and oranges, strawberries, kiwi, and if I kind of leap over to the vegetable section really quick, broccoli and red bell pepper are also some nice choices too. And if you're interested, you could also Google what are the top food choices for vitamin C, and you can get other ideas on that. The next food is vegetables. At least 3 servings of whole vegetables every day. And again, that wide variety of colors makes a pretty big difference because every different color has a different phytonutrient, a different antioxidant, a different vitamin, mineral. It all has fiber. And I like to bring that up because so often in America, we like to rate what is the best, what is the worst. And perhaps instead looking at what are the foods I enjoy. And how do I enjoy them? Gosh, with vegetables, you can bake them, you can roast them, you can stir fry them, you can eat them raw, you can microwave them and grill them, all sorts of different ways. And you can add seasonings and spices to really enhance their flavors. You can add them to foods such as soups and stews and spaghettis. You could even buy zoodles and substitute those for noodles, or you could buy cauliflower rice and substitute the cauliflower rice for rice and put a really delightful, delicious something on top. You know, it can be all sorts of different things can go on top. Anything you would put on top of rice, you can do on top of cauliflower rice, and the same with zoodles for noodles. I do highly recommend that it is quite flavorful, the product you put on top, because the zoodle would taste like zucchini, which is fine, but it's kind of nice. It doesn't carry a whole lot of its own flavor, and the same with the cauliflower rice. So let's talk a little bit about serving size, because sometimes people get a little bit nervous. They're like, 3 servings a day, are you kidding me? I don't eat very many vegetables. So a serving of something, let me give you an example. And you can see here with the picture, carrots or broccoli or radishes or tomatoes. Half a cup is 1 serving. Or if you eat leafy greens, kale, spinach, lettuce, a cup is a serving size. And there's a little bit differences between vegetables. And you can see here on the handout, there are starchy vegetables, full of nutrition, full of good nutrition, but there is a difference, right? They contain more carbohydrates than non-starchy vegetables. And so one way to think about that is you can look at the handout and think, okay, for my 15 grams of carbohydrate, I get, let's see here, half a cup of potato, or a half a cup of peas, or a half a cup of corn, or a half a cup of sweet potato. And, or another way that when I talk with my patients, that you can look, if you have a 9-inch plate, and I would recommend that to be the size plate that you use, and kind of to go off a little direction. If you have a big plate, and you're trying to put a smaller serving on it, your brain's going to feel deprived, and it's going to be quite challenging for you to be successful. But if you have a smaller plate and you fill it up once, then it can more meet your nutrient needs and your brain feels good too. So back to those starchy vegetables, they would take up 25% of the plate. Now, if we switch over to the non-starchy vegetables, and you can see quite a large number of non-starchy vegetables there, then that can take up to 50% of the plate. And if for right now you're not really eating vegetables, well, I'm not sure that I mean, you can decide what your goal is. That would be a pretty big leap. But honestly, it's trying to start including them at lunch or at dinner or at snack or even at breakfast too. Now, there is a nutrient that's been well studied that is contained in a number of vegetables, and that's vitamin A. And vitamin A helps prevent infection by keeping the skin and the tissues healthy. And some good sources are sweet potatoes, carrots, kale, spinach, and red bell peppers. So trying to include those types of foods in your day can be helpful too. But I don't want you to sweat it. I don't want you to get worried that you need to hit 5 a day, 5 different colors. I've had patients come back after a week or 2 of working on some nutrition goals, and they say, wow, I hit the 5. It was exhausting. You know, I had to plan it and shop for it and eat it and prep it and all those things. And you know what? Do not worry about that. If the raspberries are on sale this week, eat raspberries all week. Enjoy your raspberries. If you're in the mood for carrots and celery and tomato, eat those. And then maybe next week you'll be in the mood for something else. So it's for, you know, enjoying the foods in the ways that you enjoy it. So moving on. Omega-3 fatty acids, wow. Not only is that a powerful antioxidant, but it helps build your immune system too. And some examples include salmon, sardines, shrimp, tuna, herring, and trout, which are more of the fish-based, right, omega-3 fatty acids. And then the examples I have for the plant-based are walnuts, tofu, and ground flaxseed. The reason I specifically say ground flaxseed is because when you grind the flaxseed, then you can absorb the omega-3 fatty acid. But if you're eating flaxseed more for the soluble fiber, then you would keep it whole. The next one is nuts and seeds. And the recommended amount is 1 ounce of nuts and seeds on most days. And an ounce is about 1/4 cup, or it is the size of like a small woman's hand, a small amount, or 20 almonds would be another example. And contained within nuts and seeds is vitamin E. And vitamin E is pretty well researched, and it's been shown to positively affect your immune function. And specifically, almonds, sunflower seeds, and hazelnuts contain a nice amount of vitamin E. And there would be some other nuts in there too that could be nice sources that you could research for yourself. With nuts and seeds, watch out for the portion size. The calories add up quickly. I had a patient that enjoys smoothies, and she had heard how healthy seeds were, and so she added a tablespoon of chia, a couple tablespoons of hemp, and before she knew it, she was up 200 calories on her smoothie. And I'm not suggesting that you need to focus or really hyper-focus on calories, but being aware of them is important because in her case, she wanted the health factor. She wasn't really doing it because she enjoyed it. And so it wasn't, I guess, 200 calories worth of benefit for her situation, because she was also had some weight goals as in addition to anti-inflammatory goals. And so we just modified that, but being mindful of that can be helpful. Lean protein. You know, lean protein in terms of immune function, it helps you heal and it helps you recover. It is an essential part of your body's defense system. And some good some good foods that include good lean proteins is lean meat, poultry, eggs, beans, or tofu. So when I say lean meat, I'm really referring to beef and pork, and looking at the cuts that say round or loin in the name. Flank steak is also lean. I would recommend you try to limit that to 1 serving a week if you can. And a serving size is 3 ounces, which is about the size of the palm of my hand or a deck of cards. And if we go poultry, I'm talking about chicken or turkey without the skin. And then kind of jumping to tofu and beans and eggs. Well, tofu and beans are some nice plant-based options that contain a nice amount of protein in them too. Now, as far as tofu goes, that is interesting because sometimes people get worried about the amount of soy that they eat in a day. Now, the FDA recommends that, or they don't recommend, they have found that you can decrease your risk of heart disease by eating 25 grams of soy a day. And so if you have 3 ounces of tofu, that's about 8 grams of soy. And you could get soy in other products too to get yourself closer to the 25. I bring it up because I want you to realize kind of the numbers there of how much is too much. Honestly, the only time I've had patients come in where I've been a little bit like, oh, let's kind of look at how much soy you're eating is when they are drinking a protein drink that is using soy as a protein source, right? Because that can have 20 grams per drink. And if they're eating protein bars that the primary source is soy. Supplements can add up very quickly, much more quickly than whole foods. And so if you're enjoying soy products through tofu, edamame, soy milk, soy yogurt, I have a feeling that you're within the guidelines. Monounsaturated fats. You see they're listed unrefined olive oil. That is an antioxidant that has been well researched and can be quite effective. I specifically put unrefined because that's the one That has been shown with the most results. Now, I'm not suggesting you can't use other vegetable oils. In fact, all the vegetable oils are fine. They are better choices than the oils such as butter or lard that are high in saturated fat that we'll get to in a bit down later in the program. What I would like you to pay attention to is the smoke point, because if you enjoy stir frying or heating your foods at high temperatures, make sure you pick the correct oil because you don't want it to smoke. That's not a good idea. And also pick your oils because you like the taste, that you enjoy how it enhances the taste of your food. Spices for taste and nutrition. Garlic, ginger, onion, saffron, turmeric, black pepper, curry, thyme, oregano, and rosemary are some of the spices out there that not only are powerful antioxidants, but they also can boost and optimize how well your immune system works. Now, I want to spend a little bit of time on turmeric because it is a powerful antioxidant. However, there's some specifics about it that I think it's important for you to know. So I'm going to grab my notes here. So in terms of turmeric, the active ingredient is curcumin, and it is approved by FDA. It is considered safe. If you are on a blood thinner or like Coumadin, please talk to your doctor. Even if you're not on a blood thinner, talk to your doctor before you add supplements. Supplements can interact or interfere with any type of medication you're on, and it's good to review that with your doctor. Now, one of the major issues with curcumin is that it is not bioavailable. So supplement companies need to take that into consideration. And so you can check your supplements, or when you're shopping, this is what you want to look for. One thing is you want it standardized to 95% curcuminoids. The next is one way to enhance bioavailability is through adding piperin, which is a component of black pepper. Other manufacturers have found ways to improve absorption through adding fats, and it might say something like solid lipids on the label, or micelles, or nanoparticles, something of that sort. And if you cook with turmeric, remember turmeric is in fact the spice, sorry, I said turmeric, then you can cook with it and add some type of oil, which would be a healthy fat, to improve absorption. And the recommended dosage is 200 to 400 milligrams per day. If you do have a chronic inflammatory condition, you can go as high as 1,800 milligrams per day. It is recommended that you break that up into 3 to 4 times a day. And always, always, always check with your doctor before you do any of this. If you are interested in the handout, I will have my email at the end of the program, and you are welcome to email me, and I can email you that handout. And I didn't mention before, but with the handouts I showed previously on fruits and vegetables, you can email me if you would like an email version of that handout. One last thing about the spices is it's okay if they're fresh or if they're dried. Whatever's convenient for you and how you enjoy cooking, then that's the way I want you to use your spices. Whole grains are not as well studied in terms of the anti-inflammatory properties. It'll be interesting as the research continues on how helpful they are. There's no question, they are a prebiotic, so they do help with your digestion. And how they do that is they feed those really good bacteria that are quite powerful. And if you've heard of the microbiome, it can be very helpful for the health of that. And when I say whole grains, the recommended amount is 3 ounces a day. That really varies per person. Basically trying to get some type of whole grain during the day. And let's kind of define what is a whole grain. If you try to ignore the front of the package, honestly, the manufacturer is just trying to sell you a product. Sometimes, in fact, it seems like they're trying to trick the consumer. So instead, just go right to the consumer facts label and nutrition facts label and the ingredient list. And the first word on the ingredient list should be whole. And it doesn't really matter if it's whole rye or whole wheat or whole corn. The fact is you're getting the whole product. And the whole product means you get the germ, which is the fat, you get the bran, which is the fiber, and then you get the endosperm, which is the starchy part of the kernel. Dairy is our final food that we're going to look at. And dairy can be a nice source of protein, but be sure to check the label, because if you're drinking cow's milk or soy milk, you get about 8 grams of protein, 8 grams of protein per 8-ounce cup. If you have some dairy alternatives, perhaps almond milk or coconut milk, just check the label. Oftentimes they're more like 1 to 2 grams of protein, which is fine. I just don't want you to be thinking you're getting protein when you're not getting protein. Another nutrient that is in dairy that can be quite helpful for your immune function is vitamin D. And dairy has some vitamin D in it, and you can also get a little bit in fatty fish, a little bit in eggs, a little bit in mushrooms, depending how the mushrooms are grown. But honestly, especially those of us that live in the Pacific Northwest, it can be hard to get enough vitamin D. And vitamin D is quite powerful. It does help both to decrease inflammation and to improve how well your immune system works. And you just want to have enough. You don't need too much, but you really don't want to have too little. And so having 1,000 milligrams a day as a supplement, especially if you're a person that doesn't really go outside during the summer months, or if you really need to lather on the sunscreen, because that is another way you can get vitamin D, is through the skin, but not through sunscreen. And so talk to your doctor about it. And if you're under a doctor's orders to have more vitamin D than 1,000 a day, then certainly follow what they recommend. Now, there is one last nutrient I forgot to mention, I want to mention because it is quite powerful too, and that is zinc. And it has been pretty well researched, and it has been shown it is key for immune function. And so some foods that you can find zinc in include lean beef, wheat germ, crab, wheat bran, sunflower seeds, almonds, milk, and tofu. Now with this handout, this is an overview of what we talked about. That lower part on the left-hand side says what to eat and drink on the anti-inflammatory eating plan. And what I suggest that you do right now is you take a look at that list. There's 10 items, and you choose one thing. You choose one thing that you're going to work on, and I would recommend for the next month. And my reason being that, let's say, for example, you decide that you are going to increase the number of vegetables that you eat, and you're going to try to go for the 3 a day. So what do you have to do? You have to, within your already busy day, figure out what vegetables you like, make a shopping list, because you have to kind of figure out how you're going to eat them. Are you going to include them in recipes? Are you going to eat them fresh? All these different decisions. You have to go grocery shopping. You have to prep them, and then you have to actually eat them. Because sometimes people buy vegetables and they sit in the fridge and they don't get the benefit through osmosis, right? And that is a lot of steps. And so I've found it can take a couple weeks kind of to figure out your pattern. Because let's go back to just to eat them part. When are you going to eat them? And how are you going to remember to eat them? And are you able to do that 5 or 6 times a week, right? That you're pretty consistent with eating them. And so I found if you kind of get it all dialed in the first 2 weeks, then you practice it the next 2 weeks, then it just becomes a little bit easier, and then you're ready to move on to the next change that you would like to make. So that's what I would recommend. And So the next step, we're now going to move on to those fighting inflammation and how are we going to minimize those pro-inflammatory foods. The first one I have listed here is added sugars. It says here, sugar sweetened foods and drink. The reason I have it listed first is I have to say that of all the changes my patients make when they're working on decreasing the type of food in their eating plan, is if they're able to increase the amount of added sugar, they can notice it. They can tell a difference. And that's why I have that listed first. The recommended amount is less than 40 grams per day. In fact, if you look at American Heart Association, their recommendation is even less, 25 grams a day for women, 37 for men. So it does matter what recommendation you're looking at. How to figure out how much added sugar you're getting? Take a look at the label. The coolest thing happened in January, well, maybe not the coolest thing, but it's kind of cool in my world, is that all large manufacturers have to include added sugars on the label. And by 2021, the small manufacturers have to include it too. So do you see that there in yellow? So you'll have total carbs, then you have dietary fiber, then you have sugar, and then you have added sugar. So the 40 grams I'm talking about is added sugar. It's not fruit, it's not vegetables, it's not dairy, and all those foods contain natural sugars, but it's what the manufacturer has added. Here's some examples. If you were to have a 12-ounce soda, that's 39 grams added sugar. Check that baby off. All done with all the added sugars for the day, huh? 20-ounce Gatorade, 34 grams added sugar. Half cup granola, 13 grams added sugar. I want to stop here just for a minute because I've had several patients come in and they find this out and they say to me, Julie, the only reason I'm eating granola is because I thought it was healthy. And I'm like, well, you can find healthy versions, but you have to look at the nutrition facts label. You cannot look at the front of the package where they're trying to sell your product, right? 2 tablespoons teriyaki sauce, 16 grams added sugar. What in the world? Who even eats only 2 tablespoons of teriyaki sauce, right? So that one was kind of a bummer when I found that out. 2 tablespoons barbecue sauce is right up there with the teriyaki sauce. And I'm not suggesting that you can't ever go over 40 grams of added sugar to be healthy. What I am suggesting is if you decide this is going to be your thing, that for the next month you really want to decrease your added sugars, go for it for 6 out of 7 days. I have found when people just enjoy a meal 1 day a week and don't worry about all the rules and their health goals, that they do better in the long term, and they can still achieve their best wellness self without being perfect. 6 ounces Yoplait yogurt, 13 grams added sugar. And if you actually add sugar to your foods, 1 teaspoon of sugar is 4 grams added sugar. And this handout, as you can see on the left, lists on the left-hand side of the handout, it lists added sugar. And so then if the product that you buy doesn't have a nutrition facts label, it will have an ingredient list. And if you see these foods that are listed here as added sugars on that label, then near the front, because if the ingredient label is, the order is in terms of how much of that product is in the food, right? So the more the product, the closer to the front of the list it is. And so if the added sugars are near the front of the list, you can guess that that food has quite a bit of added sugar in it. And then in fact, perhaps it's a food that has a label but just doesn't have added sugars listed, but it would have sugars listed, then you can assume, oh, most of those sugars are added because there's so many added sugars in the product. So you can kind of be a detective sometimes with some of these food products. How are we going to decrease added sugars? And I have a few ideas here. One is decrease frequency. If you enjoy foods, let's say you enjoy an ice cream bar after dinner at night, and you have it every night after dinner, well, maybe try to have it 3 times a week instead of 7 times a week. So you still get to enjoy it, but not quite as often. Or maybe decrease the serving size. My coworker loves Ben and Jerry's ice cream, and when he realized how much added sugar was in the whole pint, which is a serving size, then he decided to make a change. And so now he takes a big marker and he marks, because there's 4 servings in that Ben and Jerry's, then he marks it in quarters and he sticks to it. And that way, or that strategy, has been working for him. And maybe you can figure out your own strategy that works for you. Substitute fruit. And it can be fresh, frozen, canned, or dried. The canned or dried, look at that label. Try to get them with no added sugars or very little added sugars. Definitely choose foods that you really enjoy. I have a patient that has a banana milkshake at night, and it is frozen banana with milk, and he puts it in the food processor or his mixer, and he says it's delicious, and he says it's almost, the flavor's enhanced because he calls it a banana milkshake. So for him, that works really well as his evening snack, and he's sleeping so much better. That's the other thing, that you can start paying attention to. What are the other benefits that I'm getting from decreasing my added sugars? Maybe I have more sustained energy. Maybe I have fewer cravings because I'm replacing the added sugars with something with a little bit of proteins or some healthy fats. Maybe I sleep better. Maybe my blood glucose numbers are better. Maybe my weight has decreased a little bit. There's just can be so many positives to making those changes, and paying attention to those is quite important too. Keeping a food journal. How much added sugar are you getting right now? That might be your first step, is writing it down. So we kind of covered this, examples of strategies to decrease added sugars, and we ran through a couple of those. So this is a fun slide. Registered Dietitian Nutritionist, and that is the nutrition facts label. They're credible, dedicated, there's no gimmicks, they're science-based, and they're compassionate. I've included this because if you are interested in getting more nutrition information, if you feel like seeing an expert in nutrition would be helpful for you in achieving your health goals, then a registered dietitian nutritionist has the background, they have the education that would be able to help you. If the person you're researching has nutritionist behind the name, then ask them, what is your education? Because you can't tell when a person has nutritionist behind the name. And as for me, I do see patients. I see them at my South Everett office at IRG, Physical and Hand Therapy. And I see those patients face to face, and we go over, we're following all the COVID recommendations. I also do telehealth, which is a little bit like Skype, where we're face to face, but via the computer. So you're in your home, I'm at my office, and we have the appointment. The appointments last about 55 minutes. And I also offer free nutrition screens. If you have some questions, or if you're not sure that really a whole appointment would be helpful for you, then we can sit down and talk, and we can do that via the phone, telehealth over the computer, or face-to-face. And at the end, there will be phone number and email, and you can always contact me if you're interested in those options. Here is a handout on reliable consumer nutrition information. So if you would like a copy of that, again, please email me. But you can see there at the top, Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. You can go on that website and you can find all sorts of science-based nutrition information and helpful and useful and quite interesting articles. In addition, if you are looking for a dietitian, you can find a person on that website. And there's plenty of other good sources on this handout too. I'm gonna wait just a moment, so if you wanna take a screenshot of that, you go right ahead. In fact, I'm going to get a drink while you do that. High sodium foods. If I was to pick the next most pro-inflammatory food, that would be sodium. And where you find sodium, it's not in the salt shaker. Most people think it's in the salt shaker. It's in the processed and packaged options at the grocery store, and it's in the restaurant where you don't really have any control. The recommended amount of sodium is, well, dietary guidelines recommends 2,300 milligrams of sodium per day, and the American Heart Association is even lower than that at 1,500 milligrams of sodium per day, or less is fine. And again, it does depend on the individual and what your individual needs are, but for the average American, we are consuming about 3,500 to 4,000 milligrams of sodium a day. And what that's leading to is extra bloating, that kind of bloaty feeling. Fingers and feet are swelling, and kind of just this lethargic feeling. And it can also affect your joints and how they feel. Examples of restaurant sodium content is Taco Bell black bean burrito, which isn't all that big, 950 milligrams of sodium. An average restaurant meal, 1,500 milligrams of sodium. Just think, that's what the American Heart Association wants you to have in the entire day, and that's in one meal. McDonald's cheeseburgers, 680 milligrams sodium. An Olive Garden cheese ravioli with marinara, 2,140 milligrams in sodium. And that is only the main entree. That's not including the salad, and that's not including the breadstick too. So how are we going to reduce the amount of sodium that we eat? One way is to eat home-cooked foods more often. And that's because then you're in control. You not only can use more herbs and spices, right? You can modify recipes. You can use lower sodium products, like lower sodium sauces. That's where it seems like it adds up a lot. Lower sodium soy sauce, or a mixture of both, right? So you end up lowering the overall content of the food. Eat out less often, share a meal, and perhaps during these times, you would, unless you live with the person, you wouldn't necessarily share the meal, though you could cut that right in half, couldn't you? Or when you're at the restaurant, you can ask for a box and put half your entree in before you even start. The reason I mentioned the box and before you even start is because if the food is sitting in front of you and you're enjoying the ambiance and the food and the conversation, it's very hard to stop. But if it's in a box, that's kind of like a reminder to your brain, oh, wait a second, my goal was to eat half a portion. So it kind of can help. Let's see, take half the food home. I think I mentioned that. Order dressing and sauces on the side so you get the amount that you want and you don't get as much sodium, because that's where oftentimes the sodium is hidden. How about check out the menu? Check out the nutrition information either before heading out, or if you're not driving, you can check it on the way, and you would just be amazed at how many restaurants have their nutrition facts information online. And maybe you'll find out how much sodium is in it, and maybe you'll still choose that product, but at least you have the data, at least you know, and then maybe you'll find something that's lower in sodium that you enjoy just as well, and be mindful how you feel after. So often I'll tell my patients, I'm like, not only enjoying the meal during, but how do you feel after? And if you feel kind of all yucky and lethargic and you have to take a nap, is that how you want to feel? And if it's not, well, maybe going after the sodium could be one strategy for you to pursue. Refined grains is another pro-inflammatory. And when I say refined grains, we're going to go back to that ingredient list, right? If you're buying something like pastas or crackers or tortillas or any type of bread product like breads and muffins and English muffins and bagels, look at the ingredients, and if it says enriched flour, then that means it is a refined grain. What it means is the manufacturer has stripped off the germ and the bran, like all the nutrients. They've added a few vitamins back in, so that's why it's called enriched. It sounds so good, right? But it's really not so great on your body. I'm not saying that you can't have them. In fact, if you're a person that does eat grains, the goal is eat 50% of your grains as whole, and then 50% is not. And grains add up so fast, like the serving size, a third of a cup of rice is one serving. So if you have a cup of rice, that's 3 servings of grain, or a small piece of bread, like an 80-calorie piece of bread, not the 130-calorie piece of bread. And I bring up calories because you have to in terms of serving size. I could bring up grams of carbohydrates, but I think that would just get a little bit too complicated. But the point being, if you're buying bigger bread, it might count for 1.5 servings of your grains. Pasta, a third of a cup. So if you have a cup of pasta, that again is 3 servings. Processed meats, bacon, hot dogs, sausage, ham, and prepackaged lunch meats, those are all examples of processed meats. And not only are they pro-inflammatory, but they are also linked to 9 different types of cancer. If you're able to decrease that processed meats, that could be quite helpful. And it's a tough one because they're quite convenient, they're quite tasty, they're part of the American diet in a lot of people's homes. And so perhaps if you think this is the thing you want to do, then maybe you can do it the less frequency idea. Maybe if you're having a ham sandwich 5 days a week, maybe you could cut that back to 3 days a week or 4 days a week and put in something else to replace that. Saturated fats, definitely a pro-inflammatory food. Fatty animal foods, such as high-fat cuts of beef, like ribeye, or fatty cuts of pork, lamb, and veal also go under that category. Full-fat dairy foods are also high in saturated fats, such as whole milk, ice cream, and butter, and tropical oils such as coconut and palm kernel. Now, it can be confusing because tropical oils are plant-based, and there's all sorts of information out there about it. To be honest, coconut oil is just not very well researched. I know social media thinks it is, but honestly, scientifically based research is not available yet. If you are having any type of high cholesterol, there is no question saturated fat can lay down plaque in your arteries. How much coconut oil does, we're not really sure. I would not recommend it for most of you at this point, and that can change. And that's the thing about nutrition, and it can drive some people kind of crazy, but things can change as research comes out. So I wanted to mention, well, let's see, actually, let's go to the next slide. So that is all the content that I have for today, except I have some questions here that I wanted to answer. And before I do that, though, kind of thinking in terms of the pro-inflammatory foods, you know, you would have to decide. You could take the approach, because go back to that handout. Remember that handout that I had that had kind of really it's an overview of the whole program, and I showed it previously that maybe you could pick one goal to decrease pro-inflammatory foods and one goal to increase anti-inflammatory foods, or maybe pick just one of them and experiment and see not only if you can make the change with the food, but see if you can tell. Be mindful of the results. And so let's get to the questions. I talked about coffee and black tea. The only thing I did not bring up is yes, they do contain those bioactive compounds. Honestly, the biggest difference is going to be how much sugar and added fats you're adding to your coffee or your black tea, and which one can you add the least to, right? Because those are the things that are going to increase inflammation, not the product itself. Nightshade vegetables. When I say nightshade vegetables, I mean potatoes, peppers, tomatoes, and eggplant, and they have a bad rap. They have had for years that they are not helpful for arthritis. In fact, they could exacerbate symptoms and painful symptoms of arthritis. And there is no good research out there to support that. In fact, the Arthritis Foundation has peppers on their recommended eat list because they are so full of nutrition, all four of those vegetables that I mentioned. However, I do firmly believe that every individual has different responses to food. And if you realize that you do seem to be sensitive to some or all of these vegetables, then I wouldn't eat them. And let's see, going on to the next one, alcohol. What is the best option? So first and foremost, if you don't drink alcohol, I am not recommending that you start. This is really for people that enjoy alcohol and they would like to just have a little bit more information about alcohol. So if we look at red wine, it has the polyphenols, which is an antioxidant. So that can help decrease inflammation. Now, serving size for women, it's 5 ounces. I mean, the serving size of wine is 5 ounces and you get 1 a day. That's the recommended amount, and men get 2 a day. I think some of you might be laughing right now because you think, oh my gosh, that is not my serving size. But I'd like to let everybody know that is the recommended amount, and that would be a powerful antioxidant for you. But let's say you're wanting to know what's equivalent, right? So 5 ounces of wine, equivalent in terms of alcohol content, is equivalent to 12 ounces of beer, which is equivalent to 1.5 ounces of distilled spirits. But actually, it's all gotten quite complicated now because just think about beers. Think about the percentage of alcohol in beers. You could get from 4% to, I think, 9%, maybe more. I'm not even sure. It means the calorie content goes from 80 calories to 300 calories. And so I would go back to, what do you enjoy? What is your favorite? And what can you drink the least of and be satisfied? So best cereal. There's several ways to judge a cereal. There is a website that has kind of a nice an overview of what you would look for in a quality cereal, and that's eatingwell.com says something like best breakfast cereals. But if you're just wanting to take a look, one way to look is look at the nutrition facts label. And if you look at if it's 1 gram of fiber for every 10 grams of carbohydrate, right? So that's 1 gram fiber for every 10 grams carbohydrate. And so that means if it has 40 grams of carbohydrate in the serving, you want at least 4 grams of fiber. Get what I mean? So that's a decent whole grain cereal. Whole grain, you're going to look at the ingredient list. Is that the first ingredient is whole? If you want a higher fiber cereal, then you would want 1 gram of fiber for every 5 grams of carbohydrate, right? So then it's a higher fiber cereal. And then you can look at the added sugars. You want less than 10 grams of, well, really just sugar. You want less than 10 grams of sugar. That's one way to kind of check out your cereals and see how you're doing. And it could be interesting to spend a little time in that section. Low sodium ideas. And we reviewed a few when you're going out to eat. I just kind of wanted to cover what are foods that are just sort of naturally lower in sodium. So if you look at fruits and vegetables, they are lower in sodium. So let's say you decide you want to have hummus in a tortilla, which would be closer to 400 milligrams of sodium, which you could do, right? Because you get, let's go with the dietary guidelines recommendation, you get 2,300 milligrams a day. So if we divide that into 3 meals, right, you get, well, let's say 3 meals and a snack, you're going to get around 500 milligrams per eating time. So you have your tortilla, you have your hummus, and maybe you put lettuce and tomatoes and cucumber in that. So that doesn't really have very much sodium, those vegetables. And then maybe you have a piece of fruit. Fruit and vegetables are naturally low in sodium. And if you're still hungry, you can have some unsalted nuts. And dairy products are medium in sodium. A glass of milk might be around 120 milligrams. You'll have to check what you're buying. A yogurt might be around 80, so maybe you want a Greek yogurt at the end of the meal. So that's one way, is you could have a food that's a little bit higher in sodium, but then include foods that are naturally lower in sodium to end up with a product, with a meal that is underneath the guidelines. Another idea would be to have oatmeal, not one that the manufacturer got their hands on, just rolled oats. Perhaps you can add a no-salt nut butter, or even a salted nut butter. The salt isn't horribly high on nut butters if that's the only place you're going to be getting. And then you add berries to your concoction, maybe some almond milk or some soy milk or some cow's milk, and cook it, enjoy it. I have a patient that loves the banana in the oatmeal with the peanut butter because the banana sweetens it naturally. The peanut butter adds those healthy fats and that lovely peanut flavor. And then you get that dense, chewy oatmeal grain with it as well. And let's see. And then one last question was about cookbooks. And cookbooks are so personal. Some enjoy quick to fix, some enjoy gourmet, some want to have it be a slow cooker, some want the Instapot. And so instead, what I would focus on, these are my recommendations, is look for an anti-inflammatory eating plan cookbook, or a Mediterranean diet, or the DASH eating plan, because the DASH eating plan is anti-inflammatory and it lowers blood pressure. And I think the author of the cookbook should include the nutrition facts on that, because then you know what you're getting. Otherwise, you're kind of cooking blind, honestly. So thank you so much for listening to my program. And again, if you would like to contact me, that contact information is right there on the screen. Thank you.